It was a quiet afternoon at a small McDonald's in a suburban neighborhood. The usual hum of the fryer and the soft murmur of customers filled the air. Behind the counter, a young employee named Jake worked diligently, his mind preoccupied with the mountain of tasks still waiting to be done. Jake wasn't expecting anything unusual that day, but life has a funny way of surprising us. As the door swung open, a figure entered, causing an immediate stir in the restaurant. It was Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor, known for his iconic roles and his unwavering coolness, stepped into the fast food restaurant, his presence commanding the room. Jake, who had always admired Clint's films, couldn't believe his eyes. For a moment he stood frozen, unsure of how to react. But Clint didn't seem to care for the attention. He walked up to the counter, a calm smile on his face. "I'll have a coffee, please," Clint said, his voice as steady as ever. Jake, still in shock, quickly went to prepare the coffee. As he did, he noticed Clint glancing around, almost as if he were just another person. No fanfare, no bodyguards. Just a man looking for a quiet moment. But Jake couldn't help himself. He had to speak. "It's such an honor to meet you," Jake said, his voice filled with genuine excitement. "I grew up watching your movies. They inspired me a lot." Clint smiled warmly, his eyes glinting with appreciation. "Thank you, son. It means a lot to hear that," he replied. Jake handed Clint his coffee with a nervous but grateful smile. Clint nodded his thanks and took a sip. There was something about the simplicity of the moment. The legendary actor enjoying a quiet cup of coffee at a McDonald's, surrounded by the everyday bustle of life, that struck Jake. He had heard stories about Clint's humility, but seeing it firsthand was something else entirely. As Clint stood there sipping his coffee, a customer came up to the counter and made a rude comment about how slow the service was. Jake, usually calm under pressure, felt the sting of the words. But before he could respond, Clint put his coffee down and stepped forward. "Hey, buddy," Clint said, his voice firm but not aggressive. "Maybe cut the kid some slack. He's doing his best just like anyone else would." The customer, clearly taken aback by the intervention, muttered something under his breath and walked away without another word. Jake, still processing what had just happened, looked at Clint in disbelief. "Thanks, Mr. Eastwood. I didn't expect that," Jake said, his voice filled with gratitude. Clint gave a simple nod, his eyes meeting Jake's with quiet strength. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to know when to stand up for yourself. People respect that." With those words, Clint picked up his coffee, turned, and walked to a nearby table, leaving Jake in awe of both the man and the lesson he had just learned. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur for Jake. He couldn't stop thinking about Clint's words. The simple act of standing up for him had made Jake realize how much he had let rude customers get under his skin over the years. Clint Eastwood, of all people, had just given him a life-changing lesson in strength and self-respect. But Jake's newfound confidence would soon be tested. Not long after Clint sat down, the manager, Mr. Davis, walked up to Jake with a stern expression. "Jake, can I talk to you for a moment?" Mr. Davis asked, his tone clipped. Jake followed him to the EOM back office, heart pounding in his chest. "What's going on, sir?" Jake asked, trying to remain calm. Mr. Davis didn't waste any time. "You just made a huge mistake," he said, his voice rising in anger. "That was Clint Eastwood out there, and you were talking to him like he was just another customer. You're supposed to be working, not chatting up celebrities." Jake, confused and a bit hurt, tried to explain. "I was just being polite. He's a great guy, and he was kind enough to step in when a customer was rude to me." But Mr. Davis wasn't having it. "It doesn't matter," he snapped. "You're fired. We can't have our staff distracted like that. Get your things and go." Jake stood frozen for a moment, the words sinking in. Fired? Just for talking to Clint Eastwood? It didn't seem real, but the expression on Mr. Davis's face told him it was. Jake walked out of the office, still in disbelief. Fired. Just like that. He had been working at McDonald's for over a year, doing his best to get by, and now all of a sudden it was over because he had spoken to Clint Eastwood, His heart sank as he grabbed his things from the locker. It was hard to accept, but there was nothing he could do now. As he walked toward the door, Clint's calm voice echoed in his mind. You just need to know when to stand up for yourself. People respect that. Jake stopped in his tracks, standing still for a moment as a realization hit him. Standing up for himself. That's what he had done. He hadn't backed down when the customer had disrespected him, and he hadn't ignored the chance to connect with Clint. Maybe this was a turning point for him. As Jake stepped outside into the cool evening air, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out to see a text from a friend. Saw what happened. Are you okay? Jake sighed and typed a quick response. Yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to figure out what to do next. But as he looked down the street, a strange thought crossed his mind. What if this was just the beginning of something bigger? He had just lost his job, but Clint's words still rang in his ears. He had stood up for himself even if it cost him. Maybe it was time to move on to something more meaningful. The next few days felt like a blur for Jake. He spent hours mulling over his situation, weighing his options. Losing his job at McDonald's had left him feeling uncertain, but as the days passed, his resolve began to grow. He couldn't shake the thought of Clint Eastwood's words. People respect that. It wasn't just about standing up for himself. In that moment, it was about standing up for what he believed in and having the courage to follow through. One afternoon, as Jake was sitting at home, staring at job listings on his phone, there was a knock at his door. He wasn't expecting anyone, so he opened it cautiously. To his surprise, standing there was none other than Clint Eastwood. Jake's jaw dropped, his mind racing with disbelief. Mr. Eastwood, what are you? How did you find me? Clint smiled, his eyes twinkling with warmth. I heard about what happened, he said simply, and I figured you could use a little help. Jake stared at him, stunned. Help? From you? Clint nodded. You did something most people wouldn't have done. You stood up for yourself and others even when it wasn't easy. That's something worth supporting. Clint handed him a small envelope. There's a job opening at one of my projects. I think you'd be perfect for it. It's a chance to get a fresh start. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't just an act of kindness, it was an opportunity. A real one. His mind raced, but one thought stood out. This was his chance to make something of himself, to move beyond the limitations he had always known. With Clint's help, he could take that first step toward a new future. Jake couldn't believe what Clint had just offered him. A job? From Clint Eastwood himself? It felt like a dream. He stood there holding the envelope in his hands, feeling both humbled and overwhelmed by the unexpected turn his life had just taken. I thank you, Mr. Eastwood. I don't know what to say. Jake stammered, his voice shaky with emotion. Clint gave him a reassuring smile. Just show up and do the work, Jake. That's all anyone can ask of you. The simplicity of Clint's words hit Jake deeply. He had always doubted himself, always been too afraid to take chances. But now, with this opportunity staring him in the face, he knew he couldn't let fear hold him back. The next morning, Jake arrived at the office Clint had mentioned, his nerves running high. It wasn't the glitzy world of Hollywood, but it was a start. As he walked into the building, the reality of the opportunity started to sink in. Clint had given him a chance, not out of charity, but because he had seen something in him. Something real. Jake took a deep breath and walked through the door. There were no guarantees, no promises of success, but one thing was clear. This was his moment. A moment to prove that he could do more than just survive. He could thrive. And this time, he would do it on his own terms. Months passed, and Jake threw himself into his new job with a determination he had never known before. Every day he pushed himself harder, striving to be better, not just for Clint, but for himself. The work was challenging, and there were days when he felt like giving up, but Jake refused to. He remembered Clint's words. People respect that. And slowly, Jake began to see the fruits of his labor. He was no longer just the guy working at McDonald's. He had become a valued member of the team, trusted with responsibilities and respected for his work ethic. One day, Jake walked into the office, his mind preoccupied with the usual tasks, when his manager called him into the back room. "Jake, we've been impressed with your progress," the manager said, smiling. "We think you're ready for something bigger. How would you like to take on a leadership role here?" Jake's heart raced. A leadership role? The very thought seemed surreal, but it was a testament to how far he had come. The confidence Clint had given him, combined with his own hard work, had led him to this moment. Just as he was about to speak, the phone rang and the manager answered it. Jake stood there waiting, trying to process everything. After a few minutes, the manager hung up, turning to Jake with a serious look. "Jake," he said, "that was Clint Eastwood. He wants to know if you're ready to work with him directly on his next project." Jake's mouth went dry. Clint? He had made it this far, and now an even bigger opportunity was in front of him. I don't know what to say," Jake replied, his voice shaking. "Just say yes," the manager said with a grin. "You've earned it. Please subscribe to the channel for Clint Eastwood. Respect, thanks.